Alright, response video to the Hythloday. So look, it's a human being responding, so at least we have something. It'll have to do. So, no, I mean, we have a hard time communicating, but at least there's a form of an argument in his arguments. Somewhat like at the shape of an argument, almost. So anyway.
Fine. So yeah, that's a half-hour update where I'm at, and a little bit of feedback.
Okay, so so he was talking about his personal stuff, legal battles, essentially as an outsider, as a person who doesn't really get the whole civilization thing as formed, and I certainly empathize with that. Fighting legal battles as thinking, oh yes, there is something called ultimately. There's this system isn't insane. There's somewhere in this system some kernel of integrity, and you can you do things the right way, you'll win. My only advice is, as somebody who's walked that street, no, you won't. The system is belligerently, maliciously broken, and it will not be fixed through process. It has to be fixed from the top down, or has to be fixed. That's the word. It has to be fixed. It's broken catastrophically. The whole idea of justice, none of it means anything to the people in that system. The word doesn't mean anything to anybody in the system. They don't know what justice is. It's kind of like the cop thing, in the sense that there's this idea of a good cop is an idiotic notion, because the good cops are watching the bad cops and not doing anything about it. They know the bad cops exist. They watch the bad cops break the law, and they don't fix any of it. So the good cops are just as bad as the bad cops, because they don't fix anything. So, and the justice system is the same way. Nobody in the justice system can have any integrity, because it's so obvious about how it's a sham. And it doesn't matter what the Constitution says. It doesn't matter what any Book of Rights says. It doesn't matter what any of that shit says. They're going to do what they're going to do, period. And they don't care. They'll watch the injustice, and they don't care. And so, I would argue that you will not find satisfactory resolution. You can win a few battles, but you will not win the war.
I'll speak about the DraftScience. Going a little longer. So, I endorse.
Alright, so this is going to be a rather pleasant statement in a sense. So, I never got around to making my video of my list, but frankly, my list did have Hythloday on the top of it. I don't know if it's still there. Because he's in a sense just, he is disinterested in the core, as I would say Pyrrho is in the core of philosophy. And his ambition here is to talk about physics that's useful, or physics that makes something, or physics that, polishes something. It doesn't have anything to do, really, his core, with an accurate understanding of reality. And what these theories lack is any hope. And he kind of admits they have no hope, because they're premised on idiotic notions that just won't be true. They can't be. So his critique of Pyrrho's illusions idea that he finds irritating, I guess he's not appreciating that, from my core perspective, physics idea that all we have to do is have some fake foundation, and as long as it supports something, like you can melt steel with it, that's all we need. We don't need the truth. Yeah. And he seems to have no appreciation for the fact that if you're going to judge theories based on their potential truth value, mine overwhelmingly wins.
Plus, and speak positively on one level about Immenum's efforts and ideas. The constant pushing of the idea that, look, philosophically, you realise if you're going to get a functional, a descriptive explanation of how nature works, you're not going to philosophically entertain pull motions. Now, that's a good insight. That's
right. So he's conceding the core argument, a core argument that's glaring and obvious almost. That but all their notions, like, again, virtual is also a notion. You're saying, well, that's just rubbish. You're just basically saying Invisible Man. You're saying anything goes, hoopty-doopty. It doesn't matter what I call it. I'm making fake, phony cartoon characters. I'm saying I'm writing a story, and then all of a sudden Jimmy the Cricket shows up in the story. You know, it's all got real stuff in it, real people, real lives. They have to put gas in their cars. They have to do all this normal stuff, and all of a sudden Jimmy the Cricket shows up, and he provides some motivation for some trail in the story. And that's all they have as physics, is a bunch of fake fairy godmothers and fake characters that show up, you know, in the plot to fix the fact that they have no plot, that they have no mechanism for making anything happen, that everything that has to happen through a cartoon character.
Right, that's worthy of praise. That's worthy of praise in, I mean, the way he pushes it, yeah?
Well, I think the part that's worthy of praise goes far beyond just the fact that, okay, yeah, that's one little fact, okay, recognizing that pulls are, you know, always inverted pushes, is interesting. But I'd say, you know, compared to all the other stuff that I've brought to the table in terms of recognizing where this charge phenomena comes from and how you can create a simple mechanism to explain how it transitions from electricity to magnetism, and you know, how the difference between these monopoles and the dipoles, and, you know, very simple in a sense as a foundation, and yet you know, to me that's got, you know, that's a lot bigger than just push and pull, a lot more than just saying pull can't work. I've brought to the table a lot more than that in terms of explaining possible explanations for redshift, you know, cosmic redshift, possible explanations for time dilation, what appears to be time dilation. I brought a lot to this table, more, you know, substantial theory.
And it's noteworthy insight to anybody who watches his channel. But I just find it too frustrating. I find that I can't tolerate the vague language when he says things like, it's sort of like, oh, you can understand.
Well, there's nothing to compare it to. So you're talking about the thing that creates a phenomenon. So there's just no way to compare it to something else. It's the only one, just like consciousness. So this came up in the philosophical conversation about consciousness, but somehow I'm supposed to metaphor consciousness to some other thing, some mechanism, and say, see, it's just like. And because I'm not saying, see, it's just like, you know, he doesn't understand. So this is almost a duplicity about these kind of conversations. Is in one category of conversation, yeah, you know, he wants it. It's just like, show me a comparison. And in another conversation, he's saying, you're just making comparisons. You're not getting to the origin of something. It's creation, the notion itself. Again, I'm not going to be able to tell anybody why a photon moves. It's just not going to happen, right? I mean, there's certain elements of physics that'll always remain a mystery. Big bangs, initial sparks, whatever you want to call it. That crap's never going to be explained by anybody. And if that's what you're holding out for in a theory, well, clearly you're being duplicitous, because you're not holding out for that. You're accepting that, well, Suskind's got an interesting idea. Of course, it doesn't have any explanations. It doesn't have a foundation. It doesn't have anything. But it's interesting, and where your theory somehow isn't. And his has got my flaws plus more flaws.
That's not the words he uses. That bugs me. I just watched him today with his volume 3 of his summarising his theory, and it's replete with these vague notions of you can sort of see, and
Yeah, yeah, and it's replete with them. Why? Because I've one man for 7 years to explain all phenomenon in physics, right? So I'm trying to give you some idea of why atoms are creating this capacity to move pressure through wires, and that pressure is radiated in a certain way, and that it can only be collected in a certain way, and it all has to do with the composition, chemical composition of the different materials, and whether the charge can move across the surfaces, or whether it can be transferred through an insulator, and paramagnetic and ferromagnetic. Not exactly something where you're saying give me a great organized lesson plan, just like Professor Lewin maybe, right, where I engineer experiments to look a certain way, right? Don't do them a funny way, because then it won't look right. Do it this engineered way. Just do it this standard way, because the standard way shows the phenomenon. But if you do it the non-standard way, it shows that maybe the whole theory is nonsense. So, your expectations, frankly, are unreasonable. And I guess I would argue that, again, you're not making real fair comparisons. My only obligation is to demonstrate that their pile of shit, okay, and my pile of shit are sitting on rational scales. And I'm saying it's quite obvious that theirs is simplistic, full of invisible man, full of fantasy characters, okay, and that mine is attempting to explain to you that here's a checkerboard, has very simple functions for, okay, not complicated at all, rules of how to play checkers. And I'm basically illustrating to you how obeying these simple rules of pressure moving through systems, you can understand why complex arrangements can end up being the byproduct. I just don't think you're being fair cop. Sorry. You have a clear bias for somehow convention. Somehow you have a clear bias for somehow I'm supposed to break all the existing mathematics, when I've sort of argued that, yes, 95% of the existing mathematics is fine. It's only this abstract part they get into where I could point out how their answers really aren't right. They really don't match the results. Even the two-slit experiment. Again, eventually we're going to get to a Professor Lewin videos where he has some of this light diffraction stuff in it. And I might be able to clearly illustrate that. We'll look at the pattern and look at their math. And look at the fact that the pattern doesn't match their math.
It's essentially like, rather than saying concretely.
So again, I like to say concretely, but saying concretely is going to mean I'm going to have to I'm going to have to go into the chemistry of materials and show you the actual molecular structure of steel or copper or some other conductor, and explain how, see, this interior molecules can't expand, they can't absorb pressure because, then they push on all the other molecules, blah, 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 blah. But these exterior atoms have lots of room to change, to morph, to turn into ions. They can do it. So they do it. And that's why the tendency is for the pressure to migrate across the easy surface to bend. And only in extreme cases does it start trying to bend the interior surfaces, and that's when it starts to melt.
Everything is sort of like his explanation. Right?
Yeah, well, I think sort of like is I think, again, the only way to ever argue anything is to make comparisons. Every time we say the word wet, we're basically comparing something to water. So, I understand, okay, you don't like this idea. Of using already existing axioms like wetness or water in conversation, but frankly, I don't understand how you could have a rational conversation about something complex without taking a few shortcuts. So if I say it's sort of like a bunch of rats, and I walk into the room and I clap my hands and all the rats run around me, and all of a sudden there's an empty space where I'm standing, because the rats all got scared by the sound, and they're more condensed in the corners than they are on the flat pieces of wall, because there's a certain rational reason why they sort of migrate against the walls and move towards the corners. And I could give you an explanation, and that's what it's sort of like. I mean, I think that's the only rational way to explain this. And it's like I said, especially in the context where I only have 1,000 concepts that I'm attempting to order and configure in a way that you can understand this progression from these 4 rules to all of this complex behavior. And here you are complaining that I'm not doing a satisfactory job. I'd like to see somebody else do it. It's just, I'm sorry, these complaints seem, again, not honestly motivated. Because I don't know how else you would expect me to do this. One person to replace a theory that, like I said, that they've had hundreds of years to form and create and perfect. And I've had 7, one person. 1 millions over hundreds of years versus 1 with 7 years. You know, your expectations are crazy.
Rather than giving his concrete, definitive, this is what I'm saying. Because when you say that, that would translate into a mathematical statement.
Well, as I've already stated, the most of the math is not irrational, because most of it's based on effects. So why would I argue with the effects? I'm arguing causes. They have nothing, absolutely zero. And here you are complaining. I can't imagine. Well, what? Virtual photon just makes so much sense to you. Okay, it doesn't make any sense to me. Waves in fields, undescribed, unaccounted for fields that don't, like I said, photons don't have any magnetic or electrical character at all, unless they hit an electron. That's it. Without the electron, they're not magnetical or electrical. Yet I'm supposed to believe that they're being controlled by these fields. That makes sense to you. Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't make any sense to me as an argument. It sounds like Jimmy the Cricket bullshit.
So I have that difficulty. And confluence of terms, conflating of terms, seems, on the one hand, on occasions it could be counted as pedantic.
Whatever. I mean, it's just, the conflation of terms. I just pointed out where Professor Lewin was arguing that paramagnetic materials create attraction, when that's just overtly wrong.
But because you can follow what he's meaning, but at times it obstructs understanding the flow and continuance, and the continuance of one video into the next about what he means. I find, due to the conflation of terms, and I'd call it sometimes verging on hijacking a term, like field. Yeah.
Again, so complaining about using the word, I'm trying to use their rhetoric to sort of point out you can replace this notion of some magical, spooky action field with a real force, with a real thing that moves from point A to point B. The virtual photon flies at the same speed as light. So yeah, why I can give you an explanation that points out how it's a real photon, because I can explain where the energy comes from. They can't. That's why they have to call it a virtual photon, because they can't explain where the energy comes from. They can't say a real thing is creating the field, because they have no way to create the real thing. They have no mass to make it out of. They have no energy to make it out of. So they're stuck with nothing. I can explain where it comes from. Oh, man. Again, clearly, I've made it very clear in that video. So I've decided to say, okay, I'm going to call it the one field theory, because they have field theories, and I'm pointing out that there's one field because I'm pointing out there's one force that makes it. And I've said that so many times where I've talked about fields are made of something: a field of corn, a field of wheat, a field of gooses. I don't care. Let's expand the word. It's a field of something. And I've made that clear. I'm not using the word in any sense where I've been deceptive, and I just said the word field without ever contextualizing and pointing out, I mean a field of something. I mean a field of soldiers. I mean a field of these little things. So that's never been in doubt. So to imply that I'm manipulating language or falling back on old axioms of theirs or something and using a contrivance. No, I'm just sitting here trying to put this in words people can understand. They seem to understand some notion of a magical field, so I'm just trying to explain to them why it's not magical. They understand a bird coming out of, somebody pulling a bird and having it in their hand. They say, look, there has a bird in his hand. I'm just trying to explain that I can tell you where the bird came from. Okay, his little pouch in his sleeve, okay, and that's where the bird was.
He calls his system a field theory, but that's not what's meant by a field in regular science.
So again, that's your assertion. I'm just saying that Star Trek is full of the idea of a force field. We've heard of those all over the place. Every sci-fi movie ever made almost has a force field in it. Right? So obviously people understand that, oh yeah, it's made of light beams and, lightsaber be the thingy or something. It's made out of something. All right? So, yes, regular physics has a bunch of fields that have no definition. But clearly when sci-fi tries to present those to the public, they recognize they have an obligation to make them out of something. They can't just fire their field gun, right? Field gun's always got some kind of thing coming out of it, some kind of real thing, not some kind of nothing thing, not some sort of entanglement gun. Boom! I'll hit you with my entanglement gun because I have all your entangled. I have all your anti-electrons in this gun. I'm going to anti-electron gun you. I mean, come on. Like I said, I can't see this as a fair argument. It just sounds, how exactly do I do this without, I'm not supposed to replace their concepts with a more rational definition. So I can't, like, if I say the way they use the word wave, right, to describe things that have no wave character at all. So that was sort of Feynman's objection. Look, we can't use this word wave. Call it something else, but don't call it a wave and tell me a wave goes one place and one place only. Because that doesn't make any sense. Waves don't do that. And he also knew that waves were in mediums, and you're just basically saying it has to be a medium then, because waves are just compressions in a medium. I'm not the one breaking the rules. They are. I mean, they're saying photons are a wave, and yet they're afraid to say there's ether. Because can you make sense out of any other way? If photons are a wave, then there's an ether. Is that deniable somehow?
Not in no sense. So yeah, he's at this competition, and somebody left a comment saying that they predict that I'll be the first to fully concede that, like, he's totally right or something.
Yes, I would have predicted you would be. As you seem like your part of you wants to just concede and say, yes, this is a much better starting point. This has so much more character as a real explanation, and it doesn't rely on any pre-existing complex functions in the nature of the universe. Silly expansion theories, all kinds of wooey bullshit. It has to happen through this mechanical process. This gives you you're making your Rube Goldberg machine, and this gives you your choice of bowling pin, frying pan, egg flipper. It gives you your tools, and it just says, okay, just put those tools and make the machine. Where they have Jiminy Cricket talks to Daffy Duck, who exchanges it with Goofy and then gives it to the three pigs. Theirs is full of cartoon characters.
I think it's more likely that before that happens, he'll start he'll be not deleting, but...
This is amazing. So, yeah, he'll be not deleting, but then he'll call me to say, I will be deleting. I've never deleted videos, so this is just a disgusting accusation to make when I never delete videos. So just a grotesque accusation. I'd like to delete the first half of the videos I made on the DraftScience channel, actually, because, you know, half of them, those old videos, are kind of rubbish, and I probably should put a notice on them. I've done better than this. Watch a new video. You know, but I don't delete videos.
His front page to his YouTube channel will start getting new completed, you know.
So again, this is just, where have I done any of this? Where is there any evidence that I've ever tried to hide or run from the truth? Just a lie, a nasty, stupid lie.
The last video you'll ever need to see on physics, and volume 1, and the
yeah, well, I've made videos that say the most important video. I made one because it was making this basic argument that some of this is really simple. The push-pull argument, some of it is just basic, and it'll always be basic and always be the truth. And it's always going to be the truth that their physics is founded on a bunch of spooky action bullshit notions of reality. It's just full of woo.
Simplified version of physics, volume 1, you know, and start removing those before.
So again, start removing something. There's no evidence I removed videos ever. So I mean, it's just a disgusting fucking slander. I mean, it's just you know, why should I have? How do I respect a commentary based on such a false and stinkingly putrid fucking lie? An implication that couldn't be further from the truth. I've consistently demonstrated the integrity to leave horrible videos. I have videos that I'm embarrassed by them. Some of those live rooms where I start, you know, fucking foaming at the mouth. Yeah, I'd like to delete those. But it's the truth. You fucking cunt.
Anybody concedes. And it's unfortunate, this boiling down to this push-pull business.
No, it really isn't. So again, this is just amazing that, you know, all you've taken out of this is a rudimentary observation that I don't think is any more complicated than the rudimentary observation that giving photons all of the magic powers, you know, turning them into fully equipped, radar-equipped battleships that can do all kinds of fancy things, and completely ignoring the matter that they're traveling next to, the complex matter that's full of protons and electrons and arranged in all kinds of arrangements. Let's not blame the complex thing for the phenomenon. Let's blame the simplest thing in the universe. So we have a change in the photon's common behavior, and the change happens when it interacts with this incredibly complex structure, and we're blaming the photon. The photon did it. Why don't you mention that insight also? Because it's, in my opinion, just as fundamental to this. Every one of their explanations is garbage. Time dimensions. It's garbage.
It's unfortunate that he's so aggressive because, well, I find it out in a bit.
So aggressive in the sense that I'm aggressively what? Fighting the man, okay? And you're not going to be able to do that unless you have some sort of motivation. You got to be, you know, you got to keep your game up. And so you know, go ahead and argue, oh, I'm too aggressive. Well, you have to be in this position. And I'm certainly not so aggressive that, like the rest of them are using fakes and phony, you know, little fake experiments, fake demonstrations, fake. I'm not doing any of this fake shit. I'm certainly not sitting there like Professor Lewin. I'll just set up the experiment this way and I won't allow anybody to change anything. You know, because, yeah, that'll prove that my theory of how this works is foolish, is rubbish.
Actually, quantum mechanics is and the latest developments that with Susskind and a few others are.
Yeah, just, you know, so just this wacky crap that somehow they have a rational theory because they have 4 million lines of delta bullshitty T's and rubbish symbols, and they say that's the universe, when none of it ever doesn't explain anything really, and you're just, you know, sitting there glorifying evasions. I mean, just evasions, just loop-de-doo bullshit that doesn't say anything about reality.
pushing about entanglement over space is rather than seeking to unify gravity as a force with quantum mechanics, it's actually an interpretation of quantum mechanics that leads to gravitational.
Yes, prove it. I don't think you can. I don't think you could take whatever their rubbish is, put it on your video screen there, and try to draw an explanation of how it tells you what reality is. And if it's based on entanglement, I'm just saying, my default response is you're never gonna prove the existence of that nonsense.
Attraction, and I would say ostensibly through a push, yeah, but it's the push of virtual particles. And a recent PBS video on virtual particles admits that they're not.
They don't admit it. If they admit it, then they'd have to start laughing and say, "Gee, sorry, we ever brought that crap up because it is stupid, right?" We obviously can't get away with saying something as stupid as virtual photons are doing something. Obviously, they have to be a something. So yeah, sorry, our bad. They didn't admit anything.
They're a mathematical fabrication, and they're not real in that sense.
They're not a mathematical fabrication. They're in fact a necessary fabrication. The fact is they have to have them. So it's the only way they can explain the phenomenon at all, because the end results demonstrate there must be, this is happening. It must be happening. They can measure how fast it's going. They can measure different things about it. They know it's a thing. Okay, so they have to concede its properties. So of course they have to concede there's something moving the speed of light that looks just like a photon in every respect, except we can't account for where it came from. So of course they have to concede its existence in the mathematics, because their equations won't work without it.
So modern physics is clearly deficient in this explanatory power.
No, it's not just deficient, it's grotesquely deficient. It's so unhatched, it's so fetal, it's so embryonic, it's so unformed. All of its basic axioms are rubbish. And you could just say that. And you could just say, in Mendham's axioms are solid. Now, whether or not I believe he can construct Richard Nixon's face out of those 4 rules, well, I don't know if he can do that. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, you want to be pompous about it, but the point is I've given you every reason to understand that you can create 100 elemental atoms, okay, out of the pressure of the inside of suns, and arrange magnets in 100 different ways where they're stable in their arrangement. That's theoretically possible. If the atoms don't flip, you know what I'm saying, they're monopoles of charge. I mean, I can't make something that synthesizes an electron and synthesizes a proton in the big world. I can just give them a superficial look of an electron or a proton, right? So we understand that I can't make you a physical model of an atom because I can't make big electrons and protons.
In a hard physical sense, that in Mendham quite rightly, philosophically demands, if they're going to advocate that they have a physical theory, which is most exhibitors.
They advocate that they have a truth, that they think the world is built this way, that there's I'm claiming there's multiverses. They're making overt statements about how reality functions. So you know, they're making truth claims. They're not making I made it up claim. They're not making fantasy claims. They're making truth claims.
Of bad faith, that is, it's not really strictly the truth. But I'm still of the opinion that most of physics understands that they're taking metaphorical liberties in the selling of quantum mechanics.
So he's conceding the point there. They know that this is weak, and we're just going to sell it, even though it's weakly founded. The evidence is weak. So I've made video over video after video claiming they've jumped the evidence. The evidence is weak. It's tiny. It's so fucking minuscule. They're making hard conclusions based on weak evidence. And you're saying that's okay? They know it. You know it. So therefore it's okay. I don't think it's okay. I don't think it's anywhere close to okay. because they've closed the door to the conversation, and you've got to know that that's the implications of their statements. They're sitting there on this pile of weak evidence, and then they'll recite over and over again how our theory is the most proven theory in the history of mankind. It's done everything. It made this. It made the apple. It made everything. Grass is green because of it. Everything. And you're saying that's not just being obnoxiously dishonest. That's okay with you. That's how philosophy should be done. You call it philosophy, not me. I call it science. But that's science, in your opinion. I say it's crap.
And that for the furtherment of science and educational purposes, it's okay for the fancy words slip me, but for tutoring.
Yeah, grotesque shenanigans. It's okay. It's okay to just pretend we don't know what jamming in radar is. It's okay to pretend that we don't know the difference between a sinusoidal, wave and on, off, on, off, on, off.
Purposes. No, we can go. No, we're all done. So, see, I'm trying to make.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, he's done. Likewise, I have to organize my life, which is quite irritating. So I can move it, which I don't want to do. Most distressing. Alright, so we will, I think since I'm here, I might as well do this other guy's comment. Annoying turds. That's not the right video. Comments. Alright, see how horribly they're formatted in this window. Yeah, that'll have to do. I'm not gonna twiddle with it. Well, I can twiddle a little, I suppose. Just, I wish this software was a little bit more. See, it just ends up going wider as I go bigger, so that didn't work. Let's see if I make it bigger, maybe it'll fit better. Nope, it just widens the screen. Okay, so there's no real good choice. You'll just have to settle for that, so I'm not going to reshape it substantially, so you're stuck. Alright, anyway. So this is the grown Eden. I don't know what is in real. I don't know what he wants to be called. Grenadin. Alright, very funny. You have skipped the part of my comment that contains the argument of why after images should exist. I skipped it right overtly. I pointed out that I really didn't want to deal with your subject. I just figured, okay, I'll read the second half. I intended to do a more conversation on it, but regardless, I didn't delete your comment, right? You saw that, so I wasn't done with it. Then you read the second part of only to complain about me talking about them again. Yeah, to complain that you're never going to get me to agree that there exists any such thing as an after image, so there's no point. We can't communicate. I pointed it out. You don't understand what nothing is, that nothing doesn't have properties. It doesn't fill things. It doesn't go somewhere. It doesn't move somewhere. Nothing is nothing. It's the default. So, so have you now won the argument by ignoring it? I'm not ignoring it. I'm saying if you want to believe in an ether, go ahead and believe it. And I think it's completely superfluous. And I've tried to explain to you why it's superfluous. It doesn't serve any purpose. So again, my theory, my point is to argue my theory against conventional physics. You're saying I have to waste my time arguing about ethers. Okay? I'm saying you could convert my theory into ether if you're willing to concede that your ether is going to be made of a structure. Okay? That it's going to be made of something. Just as a necessary feature. I should just get a new piece of paper. So if I pointed this out in previous videos, I mean, if I made an ether out of sand, little grains of sand, it won't work, right? Because it can't perturbate anything. Because the grains of sand are not magnetically or in some way structurally tied to each other. So there's no tension. So your ether has to have tension, and tension has to be made of something. So, there has to be some ability to compress it and expand it, and to do it in, Planck constant kind of pieces. So even if you say it's not granular, and you say you have some notion of an ether that isn't granular, so it's not made out of any elements that are tied to each other like water molecules or something else that's sticky, has some adhesion, or is pressurized like the atmosphere. So you have to have something that's causing these things to be so intimately connected that they will move pressure next to each other. They're under pressure and they can move pressure. They have to be under pressure to move pressure. And so even if you try to make it out of some continuous medium that doesn't have a Planck smallness factor, well then my problem is how do you compress it? How does it go from being expanded to compressed? And what the hell is it made out of? You'll not answer any of those questions. And I'm saying that rudimentarily, philosophically, it doesn't provide a very good starting point in terms of it doesn't simplify. It starts with a complex structure rather than a simple structure. Your ether gets more and more complicated as you give it these magical functions where it can make something go in a straight line or it can make something spread. Somehow it can do both of these functions. So what did I need to draw here? Well, I guess I'll just illustrate that, what makes water work is that water has rubber bands, essentially, between the molecules, right? They're stuck. So what happens to one has to happen to the next, and to the next, and to the next, and to the next, where sand, they're not connected by any strong force, very weak force. So you hit one sand into another sand and all the energy just falls out of them. Another way is to look at it like the electrical argument, right? So I'm sort of making the electrical argument that the atoms are like little buckets, and you can fill the bucket or the bucket could be empty. And the buckets are connected with a little pipe. So when one gets filled, it can fill the one next to it, and it can fill the one next to it, and can fill the one next to it. So it can move the fluid through the buckets because there's a little pipe that lets the water go from one bucket to the other buckets, something like that. And I've made the point that if you make this into dominoes, you're still going to have movement to create your compression. Movement, 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 movement. If you're creating movement, what's the medium for your movement? Again, you're saying the medium is the medium for the medium. That's what you're saying. The medium is the medium for the medium. I'd say that's circular. Incredibly circular. Irritatingly circular. All right. But really, I'm not here to debate ether. It has no, like I said, if you turn my theory, you'd say, okay, we're just going to change the Planck constant, and we're going to say it's even smaller, all right, and that photons, okay, are just these little bits inside this ether that can bang into each other. And my argument would be is that all the little bits are already pre-moving. See, it still has to come down to the size of a photon, though. They can't be smaller than photons. So the ether bits are just photons. The elemental elements of photons, not the ray of photons, but just the elements that make the photon, the little gravity bits. You can make them into grains of sand that are magnetically tied to each other. Okay, and the effect in the universe might be exactly the same because it's just about compression or not compression. It's about moving this direction or the pressure, or moving this direction with pressure, or moving this direction with pressure, and all you're doing is changing the direction of the pressure. But they all have to have a pressure is the point. They all have to be photons, which means they already have to have predefined pressure, a movement. They have to all be moving, nothing stagnant. Okay, anyway. Let's see. That's exactly what proponents of conventional physics are doing to you. Ignoring the argument. Again, but that's not... You just really don't understand my position. I'm fighting conventional physics. Should I waste my time debunking every tinfoil hat theory in existence? I'm arguing, no, I really don't have time for that. I'm saying to you, you want to believe in an ether, go ahead and believe in an ether. I have no reason to believe in it. I don't see how it functions, how it does anything useful. You just like the word for some reason. Fine. Go ahead, like the word. I don't see how it does anything. The necessary feature is pressure. That's what causes gravity, okay? Is a lot of pressure. There has to be a lot of stuff pushing, okay, for there to be gravity. So that means the ether has to be fully engaged in creating, like I said, this random idea. If it's all randomly going in directions, it all ends up being, for every individual in space, it ends up being there's a whole bunch of stuff heading right for me. And it looks like it's all engineered to head right for me. Even though there's a ton of it going other directions. But the point is, everything's going to hit me was heading right for me from 10 billion light years away or 2 feet away. It doesn't matter how far away it is, it all look like it's heading right for me. And that's the nature of the pressure. And I just don't need an ether to create that. And if you're going to concede that your ether is pressurized, then fine. I'll agree with your ether. I'll say fine. Okay, if you say ether, the bits inside of your ether are all moving, then we don't have a problem. They all have a preordained pressure in a direction, and that direction can be changed. They can be exchanged. One little ether bit can exchange with another ether bit, and you can exchange the pressure that way. Then fine, we don't have anything to argue about, do we? But if you're going to tell me there's a static ether, a dead ether, and you just have vibrations moving through it, I'm going to say bullshit, because that ain't happening. And you're certainly going to have to explain to me how vibrations know to go in straight lines, or vibrations know how to spread, because that's what the frickin' vibrations are doing. So explain to me what's the difference? You're the one stuck with their conundrum, where you're wave particling, you know, where you're saying it's both going everywhere and going one place. Now, you want to be stuck with that. That's your liability, in my opinion. I have no interest in arguing from a silly premise that it's gone everywhere and it's only gone one place at the same time. I think that's just idiotic. Okay, that somehow it retracted all the other places it went. So it waved in big waves, and how all of a sudden those waves all disappeared and all went here instead. That's your idiotic notion. So you say ether does that. I say it's silly. I say fuck you to it. I don't need it. And I certainly don't need to waste my time arguing it. It's not conventional physics. So why would I argue it? Anyway, you're doing the same thing to me. Yeah, I'm not in the authority chair. So I'm not doing the same thing to you. I'm just merely telling you I don't have time to debunk all of you loonies. Okay, conventional physics lets you go on and ramble about your silly notions without properly telling you you're wrong. Lets Ken Wheeler just go off on his bullshit. No one fact checks. No one points out how here there's 10, 15 experiments that prove he's wrong. Yeah. I mean, screw you. You don't even bother to invest some brain power. I'm reading your fucking comments. I already invested brain power. But yeah, I'm not going to waste my time trying to explain to some idiot who doesn't understand nothing that there's no such thing as residual reality into following my argument. Instead, you decided beforehand that it must be crap. I didn't decide beforehand. I just simply explained how I hate wasting my time on this crap. And this convoluted notions that I have to explain why your phony cricket in a suit can't exist. Because first, you can't buy a suit. There's no store that sells these little suits. That's what they are doing to you. How ironic. There's no irony here, creepy stinkier. I've made it clear what my objectives here are. And my objectives are not to point out how every other dissonant is a fucking tinfoil hat kook. My objective is to fight the man. Not waste my time fighting the, you know, the mouse fetus. Alright. Okay, by the way, so here's some other guy said something to the other guy's comment. Yeah, sound waves follow the relativistic Doppler shift. By the way, he once spent an entire video series arguing that sound waves follow the relativistic Doppler shift. In classic mechanics, I'm not even making this up. This entire channel is beyond lunacy. So another non-argument. Professor Lewin thinks Doppler shift is different for photons than it is for sound waves. He thinks it matters whether it's a source that's shifting or whether it's the receiver that's shifting. There's no frickin' difference. And I explained it in my videos. And nobody countered the explanation I provided. So another asshole who provides nothing. Why don't you quote from my video what I exactly said about the explanation? You know, the whole compression argument about atoms. I remember there's a whole thing in there about how, you know, the atom's actually moving. And when the atom's moving and it has to exchange pressure with something else, its extra little movement is going to be part of the pressure it's exchanging. So if the atoms are pre-moving, and then I push it a little further, that means I gave it more acceleration, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. Oh, man, you people are such lousy, dishonest weasels. So I'll read the first half of this nonsense. I don't understand how you don't get what the problem with the problem once we remove the ether. I never have to remove it because I never even thought of it. It's a silly idea. Why would I ever even conceive of this stupid Jello theory? Empty space does nothing. Exactly. It's just there. That's right. It's nothing. It's not there because it's nothing. It provides a position. No, it doesn't. The position has nothing to do with the empty space. The position has to do with the something. Something takes a position. It doesn't need to ask nothing's permission. It doesn't need to do any of that shit. It takes the position. It has a position. Then we put a particle there. No, the particle's there when you put the something there. Sorry. Moment T1, position A. The particle changes position. What are we arguing? It has to be affected to change position or else it's a photon. So it's a photon. It's moving in a constant speed in one direction. So yes, it moves from time 1 to time 2. It moves a certain distance in space. So it now somewhere else, moment 2, yes. What is supposed to happen at position A at moment T2 and why? So again, you're asking me to explain the fundamental function of the universe. Why does the photon move? And my argument is that's what photons do. They have perpetual motion and they move perpetually. That's what they do. It's just the way the physical universe works. You can't accept that? Fine. I don't have anything for you. You're going to sit there and tell me you have an explanation by creating a more complex structure that the photon vibrates through, for which you will not explain anything about what that structure is or how it's made or how it works. Nothing. You'll just say it perturbates. So you're just saying that, okay, you're not going to accept axioms. You know, a point where we can't you know, go any further. I can't tell you why the universe has stuff in it that's going the speed of light, but it does. At moment T1, there is not empty space at position A. At moment T1, there is not empty space at position A. Yes, exactly. But if movement through empty space is possible, then there must be empty space at position A at moment T2. Again, the space is irrelevant. It doesn't exist. It's a nothing. The something has moved from one position to another position. It's changed its location in absolute space, as dimensional space, as distance. It's gone from one place in three-dimensional measurements to another place in three-dimensional measurements. In 3 dimensions. That's all. And it'll only be a change in space between it and some other something. So you have to have at least 2 somethings to have any relative motion. By what mechanism is this supposed to happen? I say again, what mechanism creates your perturbations in your ether? So again, you're not providing, you're just saying your theory's right, your axioms are right, my axioms are wrong. I'm just going to say the same thing to you then. You're not providing any explanation. I could ask these same questions to you and you have no answer. How does your ether perturbate? What makes it empty again? So again, it doesn't have to make it empty. It didn't drain the empty out. It didn't replace empty. It didn't do any of that nonsense. It is a something. The something occupies the space and always occupies it, we could argue, if it's perpetual, if it's forever. It always occupies. This is its shape. This is its thing. And all it does is move relative to each other. By what mechanism is this supposed to happen? What makes it empty again? You can't have empty space do it. Again, so you're saying I could keep indulging in a conversation where you keep saying things I can't accept. I will not accept any notion that space does something. It's nothing. Nothing doesn't do something. So every time you tell me I have to have space, do it, I'm going to say, fuck you, we're done. This conversation is idiotic. So the particle must be doing it. How? Again, how does your ether do it? So you're just, you know, this is just so fucking stupid. I don't know. It's like some Muslims saying, you haven't explained who invented your God. Why, what sense would it make for him to say that when I could ask him the same question? If nothing happens at position A, nothing changes. So again, just idiotic. If no mechanism is in place, then there will be after images. So again, again, I don't even know how you make up this, how you even make this connection that there's something required that this pen moves from here to here and somehow it has after images somewhere. No, it doesn't. If you make empty space automatically clean up by itself. It doesn't have to clean up. It's not being replaced by something. The empty space isn't pushed out of the way. Again, you keep turning the empty space into an ether. It's not a something. It's nothing. That's admitting to an ether. I never did any such thing. So this obnoxious comment you think makes your argument solid, and somehow I cheated you by not reading this absolute fucking rubbish. How are you going to make the particle do it? Just some more, fuck you. I mean, if you want to keep arguing ether, then just get the fuck out of here because I'm blocking you. Alright, so if you keep bringing up ether, we're done. I'm not here to debunk ether. I'm not here to debunk, free energy and all the other 900 other pieces of shit, bullshit that nonsense people believe in. You want to believe in an ether? Go ahead. I just said, go ahead and believe it. I think you're an idiot. I think you're fucking investing in a bad stock. It'll bring you nothing. It'll bring you no joy or happiness. Okay, because it's the wrong answer. But go ahead. Waste your time. Waste your brain space. Alright, so maybe I'll just read the rest of this. He's only a poser, okay, so, right, who's made hundreds of videos drawing and explaining. So another guy who can't argue with anything I've presented, just sits there and just makes these vacant accusations, whose knowledge of Faraday's law only goes as far as the energy bounces off the magnet. So again, more crap, and hits the wire, and that moves the electrons. So this isn't, that's not a real quote, so it's just more crap. But clearly that's exactly what's happening. All right, is the magnet and is charged, it's the surface, okay, has a positive end and negative end essentially, and the conductor, when exposed to that, charges. And in the case of the conductor, it charges opposite. It's pressurized, the atoms. They gain pressure from being exposed to pressure, and the pressure moves through the wire, attempts to. But there's places it can't go because once they're all pressurized, the only way they can exchange pressure is there has to be something without pressure next door. And if there's no low pressure next door, the high pressure can't go anywhere. If it's high pressure next to high pressure, they can't transfer anything. Dear. That's the depth of knowledge he has of it. So again, and I'll challenge you to make a real argument. So you're just vacant, right? You don't have a real argument why I'm wrong. So you're wasting your effort. Well, clearly you don't have an effort to make. So you're wasting yours because you got nothing. You got no argument. You have nothing to defend your fairy tale notions of reality. That Faraday made a law and therefore there's this invisible force doing invisible things. Okay, yeah, no, you're the one full of shit. And so put your name on it, Douglas Levinson. Great. Hopefully in the future somebody might see you on the street and say, ha, you're one of those idiots who doubted. You're just a doubter, a dismisser. Okay, you didn't make any argument. You didn't demonstrate an experiment that proves anything I've said wrong. And I've done exactly what an honorable person does, which is I'm playing Professor Lewin's videos. I'm listening to his arguments, and then I'm presenting a counter argument. I'm the one with showing the integrity. You're the one showing none. All right. So enough. Till the next time and such. Humans. They're just it's just not worth their breath. They're just dumber than, like I said, I'd rather talk to the dead Coco, the gorilla. A dead Coco is probably more receptive to reason than these idiots.